All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are opening up one of the absolute most legendary cold case files in American history. In this explainer, we're going to dig into the sheer mechanical genius, the hard evidence, and the lingering mysteries of a night that literally defied the impossible.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth is a 1962 manhunt for Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers still an active warrant today? I mean, it's been over 6 decades since June 11, 1962, when these guys vanished into the dark waters of the San Francisco Bay. The FBI actually officially closed their investigation way back in 1979, yet the U.S. Marshal Service absolutely refuses to close the file. Why keep actively hunting for guys who pulled off a heist-like breakout over half a century ago?
Well, it all comes down to a single number: 100. You see, the U.S. Marshals have this incredibly strict protocol. They literally will not close an active warrant until the escaped men either have their fates definitively proven or they reach 100 years of age. For these specific fugitives, that timeline expires somewhere between 2026 and 2031. So until then, the hunt is very much on.
Okay, let's run through our agenda for this explainer real quick. 1. The open warrant. 2. Engineering the escape. 3. Constructing the raft. 4. Timeline of the breakout. 5. Evidence and ocean elements. And finally, 6. A cold case lives.
Section 1. The open warrant.
Before we can even really appreciate the escape itself, we have to talk about the baseline difficulty here. Because Alcatraz wasn't just any prison, right? Nicknamed The Rock for a very good reason, it was originally built as a military fort and was widely considered this impregnable fortress. Plunked right in the middle of the San Francisco Bay, it was constantly battered by relentless wind and surrounded by these freezing, wild, and frankly deadly currents. It was reserved exclusively for the worst of the worst, guys deemed way too vicious for ordinary jails, like Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. The isolation was so extreme that the mere idea of escaping felt totally fictional.
Section 2. Engineering the escape.
So shifting gears to the suspects, you have to understand this wasn't some impulsive smash-and-grab jailbreak. This was a deliberate, forensic masterclass in mechanical ingenuity. Frank Morris, who was known to be highly intelligent, along with the Anglins and a fourth guy, Alan West, spent 6 full months chiseling through salt-damaged concrete around their cell air vents. And look at what they used. Totally innocent, everyday items weaponized into brilliant tools. They stole metal spoons from the mess hall, they used discarded saw blades, and get this, they completely improvised an electric drill out of a vacuum cleaner motor. Oh, and to cover up the noise of all this DIY demolition, Morris would just sit there and play his accordion during the prison's daily music hour. Just incredible.
But honestly, busting through the wall was really just step 1. They had to buy themselves enough time to actually get off the island. So they crafted these shockingly realistic dummy heads to fool the night guards. And the process is wild. First, they sculpt a papier-mâché core out of soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, and concrete dust. Then, they used stolen paint from the maintenance shop to add realistic flesh tones. And the kicker? They swept up real human hair from the prison barber shop floor and attached it. When they tucked these heads into their beds and stuffed extra clothes under the blankets, it was a totally flawless decoy.
Section 3. Constructing the raft.
Okay, so they make it out of their cells and up into this unguarded utility corridor on the top level. Now they need a boat. And this is where basic material science enters the chat. Drawing inspiration from a March 1962 issue of Popular Mechanics magazine, they realized they could build a 6x14-foot makeshift rubber raft and life vests out of like 50 stolen and donated raincoats. To make it completely watertight, they used a process called thermal sealing. Basically, they melted and bonded the rubber of the raincoats by pressing it directly against the prison's incredibly hot steam pipes.
And I absolutely love this detail because it just brilliantly illustrates how resourceful they were. Think about it. You have a massive rubber raft, but how are you going to inflate it quickly and quietly in the pitch dark? Well, they used simple pneumatic principles. They stole another inmate's musical concertina, like a tiny accordion instrument, and they essentially hot-wired it into a mechanical bellows. They turned a musical instrument into a high-capacity air pump.
Section 4. Timeline of the breakout.
So the tools are built, the raft is ready, the night of June 11, 1962 arrives. At 9:30 p.m., the lights go out, and the decoy heads are in position. But there's a huge problem. Alan West discovers that the cement he used to hide his escape hole has completely hardened. He is trapped in his cell. Morris and the Anglins have to make the brutal call to leave him behind. They climb the vent shaft, slide down a 50-foot kitchen pipe, scale 2 12-foot barbed wire fences, and sneak to the shoreline. By 10 p.m., they inflate that raft and vanish into the fog.
The crazy part? It isn't until 7 a.m. the next morning, when a guard literally tries to wake them and a dummy head rolls onto the floor, that the alarm finally sounds.
Section 5. Evidence and ocean elements.
So what actually happened out there in the dark waters of the bay? Let's put our investigator hats back on and look at what was left behind. In the days following the massive manhunt, the Coast Guard did find a little bit of physical debris. They found a handmade plywood paddle off Angel Island, a wallet tightly wrapped in plastic containing Anglin family photos, and a couple of life vests, one washed up on Cronkite Beach and another floating just 50 yards off Alcatraz. But you know what they never found? The raft itself. And far more crucially, despite a massive search of those freezing waters, they didn't find a single body.
Naturally, these clues led to two very different conclusions. Back in 1979, the FBI officially ruled that the raft probably sank. The men succumbed to hypothermia, and they were swept out to sea by those treacherous currents. Case closed, right? Well, maybe not. Modern feasibility studies actually prove otherwise. Just months after this escape, another inmate named John Paul Scott swam to the mainland using way worse gear. Today, civilians do that exact swim in triathlons. And modern engineering tests from Mythbusters all the way to Mark Rober in 2025 have recreated the raft and proven that surviving the bay was, scientifically speaking, absolutely possible.
Section 6. A cold case lives.
And that is why, decades later, this mystery simply refuses to die. Get this, in 2013, the San Francisco police received a letter. It literally read, "I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The author claimed to be John Anglin, offering to surrender in exchange for cancer treatment. Now, the FBI did assess the letter, but its authenticity was ultimately deemed inconclusive. But honestly, verified or not, that chilling excerpt perfectly captures why the Alcatraz myth has such an enduring grip on us.
Which brings us to the end of the dossier. You've seen the engineering, you've walked through the timeline, and you've weighed the forensic evidence yourself. So I leave you with this final question. As an investigator reviewing this explainer, what is your verdict? Did the brilliant technical ingenuity of Morris and the Anglin brothers actually defeat the ultimate American fortress? Or did the brutal, freezing currents of the San Francisco Bay claim their lives in the dark? Think about it.